So we will get started today. So we've been talking through when helping her. Everybody's been here before, right? Yeah, you can look at either screen. All screens are the same.
It's easier to.
Yeah. And I'm going to try to get rid of that bar, but. Okay, so yeah, we'll review a little bit really quickly what we were talking about, just so that we're all on the same page. Hide video, hide. Oh goodness. Okay, well, we'll just leave it like that. So before we get really moving on the material, on the review and everything, here's the first question that I want you to think about. If you think about people who are materially poor in North America, who have asked us for financial assistance, someone that's panhandling, is that the word? Yeah, that's a phrase. I had also an image of Florida in my mind. So under what conditions, and we have people all the time here, at like every street light, it seems like sometimes, that are asking for money. Someone over the weekend I saw was asking for money for medical bills for someone, a family member. That was a new one. Under what conditions would you give money to people?
Well, I would give it straight to the medical place. I would not give it to the person.
Good, excellent. Yeah, so you're more inclined to give to an organization, or skip the middleman. Why give it to that person when you can say, well, I'll give it straight to the hospital?
Right.
Okay. When else might you give someone money? Pardon me? Yeah, you'll have to click on the switch at the bottom and wait. It'll turn on, and then it'll take a second, but it'll work.
You want to make a distinction between giving them cash or giving them supplies.
Fair enough, yeah.
I will often, if somebody is looking for money for gas, I will take them to the gas station, put gas in the car with my credit card.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's good.
Then I have a record I can write it off. No, I'm sorry. But
You can write it off, yeah.
they'll also be the debt that goes into their need.
Mhm. Good, good.
Make sure it goes to exactly what it's supposed to, or what they've stated.
Oh yeah, I hear you. Yeah, we've all been, we've either been lied to or perceived that we've been lied to. We have that. It's funny how that we assume the worst out of everybody though in that situation, don't we?
I don't know that we assume the worst. We just kind of figure you got to be careful.
That's fair.
Right.
Yes, Nancy.
Well, I don't want to be the person that tries to make a decision as to whether or not somebody is calling or walking in my office is telling me a wild story or and fortunately, I can say that here at the church, we donate to organizations that do help you with your rent or your utilities. May I give you some phone numbers?
Right. Yeah, that's right.
And in the cases that Marvin has wanted to become involved, if he finds out that it's somebody that is a client of a lawyer that's one of our church members, we don't assume that then it's legitimate. But again, if it's for a car repair or new tires or something, it's written, the check is written to the ordinance, to the garage or whatever.
Right. So there is some verifying that happens then.
Right. We even had one where we were helping a big portion of a car repair. We got it already, the girl was going to come by and get the check. Never heard from her.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So we've talked about local things. Yeah, Brian, go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I personally, if I sense or see contrition or humility or anxiety, I'm much more apt to give someone as opposed to the aggressive panhandler who, you know, might chase you down the street and just
Yeah,
try to
that's right.
irritate you into doing something to keep them quiet.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Like, if the story showed, if there's immediate distress that you can immediately relieve, if you will, yeah, you're more prone to respond, aren't you? Yes,
Well, I was just thinking about, I grew up in the St. Louis County, but we always went into St. Louis City. And when I was growing up, there were panhandlers on every corner. So you get used to it. At first you get kind of angry when you realize that some of them aren't honest. And then you get used to the idea that, yeah, some are, some aren't. You just have to be discretionary and go from there.
good. Okay, internationally now. If you had to shift that whole conversation to international support, international help, has anybody traveled to the majority world, we call it, so not Western world, if you will, Central America, South America, and been around and been accosted for help? Is this an experience that others have? You have? Yes. So under what conditions do we give people help? And this can also apply to organizations that come to us, come to First Pres in Colombia and say, hey, I work with an organization in Malawi. I need this, we need that. What do we do? When are you inclined? What questions might you ask with your experience?
Oh gosh, that's loud.
It's all good, it's all good.
All right, yeah, so I grew up overseas. I grew up in Mozambique. My parents are missionaries there. So this is lived
Very aware,
experience plenty.
yeah.
And I think the big thing is that, like, we would carry a lot of change because a little bit of money goes a long way as far as food, at least. And so we carried coins enough that, you know, we could give more freely with that.
Sure.
But then we also had
Okay, that's fine.
situations when people would come like to our
Sure.
door to
I didn't know if you wanted to sit in.
ask for help with like medical bills or something like that. And that's when like mom and dad would invite them in and like invite them to come and talk, and we'd discuss their situation. And then we'd try to find, we had partnerships with pastors in the city, and we'd see if we knew somebody that lived near them and could help out. But yeah, so more vetting if it's gonna be more of like a long-term type thing, but also aside from the little like cash and stuff, we always kept fresh bread and apples in our car, so that you can just give that easily also. Yeah.
If they need food, then you have it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I like that. When I traveled overseas, we had similar, when we were in Africa, I was in Malawi I did a 3-week stint out there, which, you know, isn't long enough to build relationships, but it was long enough to be able to catch on to those kinds of things. Eventually we would have, we had bags of socks. I don't know why socks, but someone told us to bring socks. So we had socks. That was one that went over really well.
I had still do have a friend who's a priest on the East Coast, and he always kept a couple gallons of milk, loaves of bread, jars of peanut butter and jelly in his refrigerator. And whenever somebody came to the door looking for food, he would bring them into the rectory, feed them, and send them on their way. And he said, you know, the ones who need it are the ones who first stay and second come back because they know they can get fed. He said, and it was sustenance. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was the people in the parish knew that if they were in need, he was always there.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so this in mind, we eventually will come to, once we get through the video, he's going to give us some terms that will help us parse out these different levels of needs and different levels of ability of people And that'll hopefully help us hash out some of the problems that we've noted, but also things that we can do and can be good at. So keep those in mind. As a review, this is week 3 of 6. Woohoo! And just to review, so poverty is broken relationships, right? We had that big map. It was a diagram it was convoluted, but the ultimate point of that diagram was to say poverty is created when we have broken relationships. And when you have a broken relationship with any one of yourself, others, God, or creation, it will cause rifts in the other relationships as they are strained and stretched and broken as well. So poverty is broken relationships. That means poverty alleviation is repairing those relationships, right? So if we are looking at what it means to do good poverty alleviation, good mission work, ministry in that sense, it's going to be repairing relationships. Keep that in the back of your mind. That's kind of the real summary of the review of what we've talked about so far. Okay, we just did this. My slides are repeating. That's good. Excellent. Okay, let's watch our video.
One thing I've learned with the communities here is that people should work. So when we teach them to work, that's when they'll own the work and they'll be able to continue with their livelihood. When you give free things, like if you found a woman and a man like this one talking, yeah, and then you give them something, they'll say, oh, that white man has seen that we are so poor, that's why he's giving us. They'll not own that money, they'll misuse that money. They'll think like they want to sit and expect someone to come and give them things for free. And it lowers the dignity of the people because they are able to work. But when you give them free things, it's like you are lowering their dignity and increasing the poverty level.
Let's start with relief and rehabilitation and development. So we've got a picture here, and you can imagine that this is a picture of our person, and this could be a person anywhere in the world, quite frankly. That person is at a particular level of poverty or of poverty alleviation. They're at some level that's kind of their baseline. But then the earthquake hits, a crisis happens, and that person is being plunged downwards into poverty. Relief is the appropriate intervention. Relief is an attempt to stop the bleeding. But once the bleeding has stopped, you then enter into what's called the rehabilitation phase, trying to restore that person in Haiti to where they were before the earthquake hit. And then finally, development is this last phase. It's walking with that person across time in ways that help them to move beyond where they were before. So relief and rehabilitation and development. Now, as I have that diagram up there, I have one concern, and that's this. It is not the case that most poor people that you are working with are coming out of a crisis. It's not the case that every single poor person is going to go through these phases of relief and rehabilitation development. Most people that you're going to work with, either at home and abroad, are actually not coming out of a crisis. They don't need relief or rehabilitation. They're simply at some level, and they need you to walk with them across time in ways that we would call developmental. And so that's actually the situation that most people are in with whom you will be working.
The issue of relief, rehabilitation, and development is really answering the question of causality. What's caused the person, the household, the community to be in the situation that they're in?
Not all poverty is created equal. meaning our approach to helping must first be evaluated. For instance, in the case of global hunger, over 1 billion people worldwide suffer from this chronic state of living. Yet, in a 1980 study presented by the Hunger Project, only 10% of those facing the issue require relief as a response. Helping a family or community facing the hunger crisis may not only avoid the heart of the problem, but may actually inhibit any future development.
One of the key issues in well-meaning people who want to help poor people is they often can end up creating a system of paternalism or act very paternalistically. Paternalism is habitually doing for people and providing for people things that they can do and provide for themselves. Let me come in and kind of do this for you. So our church comes here and we're going to do VBS over there the way it should be done. Or we're going to come build this the way it should be built. And that's detrimental.
I think we're missing the understanding that it is a long process. We really like solutions that are prepackaged and relatively simple, that have worked somewhere and that we can just plug in. And so the idea that I need to be committed to something for a long time and that it's going to be difficult and that I might get kicked in the stomach and I have to be committed to get back up and keep trying is what I think takes the wind out of the sails for some people. It's why it's easier to do short, quick bursts of good deeds. You know, that it's a lot harder to get people to sign on the dotted line for.
We see a problem when we treat symptoms, right? And symptoms counteract other symptoms, and this drug reacts with this drug, and we constantly are chasing systems and managing symptoms rather than getting to the core issue of the human condition, which is mine as well as yours.
The mission of the church is to preach a holistic gospel. It's just that we come from a background where social and spiritual had been separated. So we are going back to preaching a holistic gospel that will deal with the whole person.
Part of my background has poverty within it. Personally, I grew up in this type of a life. I've slept hungry at some stage, I've lacked school fees at some stage, and therefore when I come to a context like this, when they talk, I can connect. So that's what really pushed me into this type of engagement. And as an economics student, I felt being moved towards development, and therefore I started engaging with communities even before I got out here. Because of that passion and that thinking that, hey, life can be better than what we are seeing. As a believer, I kept on wondering at some stage, why is it that some have the resources, some don't? And all of them are created by the same God. There's a lot of self-esteem which goes back to your connectedness to your Creator. So for most of these guys, the first stage we take them through, even in business, is not directly into business training. It's helping them to deal with their hearts and transform that from within. And later on we discovered actually trying to work with the people and going directly into businesses, that it's not working. Give money to people to start businesses, you come a month later, there's nothing. What they did is just increase their consumption. Then you realize that there was more deeper problem into the heart other than in the hands. So transformation starts in the head, but it has to sink deeply into the heart, and hopefully that heart is transformed into the hands. So that's what really we work towards.
Now, the key dynamic in development work is promoting an empowering process. The process is what matters. Now, this process will typically occur in or result in some products or projects. It might be a well that's being dug. It might be a house that's being built. But the process that is being used is at least as important as the product or project itself. Development is as much about how you do the work as it is about what the work itself is. I'm going to give you kind of a crazy example to illustrate my point. And I recognize it's kind of a weird example, but I'm trying to get some ideas across. I want us to imagine 2 short-term missions trips. The first short-term missions trip focuses on producing a product, period. And what this short-term team does is it runs into a poor country and it builds 3 houses and it gives 3 houses away to the local people, and the short-termers get back on the airplane, they fly home. And they stand up in church and they say, we went and we built 3 houses. The focus is on the production of houses. Now think of a different kind of short-term trip that focuses on the process and tries to create an empowering process, because the goal isn't just to have the house built. The goal is restoration of relationships with God, self, others, and the rest of creation. The goal is to help people who are suffering from a marred identity for a whole bunch of historical reasons. The goal is to help people who often have a profound sense of shame to understand that they're made in the image of God. They have inherent dignity and worth and capacity. And they're called to be stewards over creation. They're called to try to develop the creation and unfold the creation as God intended. That's the goal. So what this short-term missions team does is they first only go if they're asked to go by the people there. Imagine that one. Now, once they get there, they say to the people, what would you like to do? Now, if the people are honest, they're going to say, let's hang out together all week. But they probably aren't going to be able to be honest with you. So we're going to get to that later. So they'll say, well, let's build 3 houses. And what this short-term missions team says, keeping the end in mind of reconciliation, this short-term team says, how do you think we should do it? And the people say, let's try building our houses out of toothpicks. I told you it's kind of a crazy example. Now, this short-term team, the goal for them isn't just the building of houses, it's a process that will result in empowerment. And so this short-term team is a little hesitant to say, toothpicks seem like a stupid idea. So what they might actually do that week is join hands with the local people, working side by side, building houses out of toothpicks. Now, at the end of the week, a big wind comes through and it wipes out all 3 houses. You now have toothpick rubble everywhere. And this short-term mission team, it gets back on the airplane, there's mounds of toothpick rubble everywhere. Failed trip, right? But the short-term team notices the village leaders standing around the toothpick rubble and going, man, that didn't work right. Let's try something different. Let's try using bricks next time, which is a more successful missions trip. If you focus just on delivering a material resource, a house, the first one is. But if you're focused on creating an empowering process that helps people to be restored, to people who are stewarding their communities, who are trying to figure it out, this is a more successful trip. Now, if you're wondering, would he really not tell them that toothpicks were a bad idea? I'd tell him. But the point I'm trying to get at is the deeper point. Focus on the process.
So what'd you hear?
Process versus product.
Process versus product. What's the process that we need to keep in mind then? What's important about the process?
What they would learn.
What they'll learn, yeah.
So
It sounds like education, very much so. Yes, that's right. Teach them any fish, feed them for a lifetime. It's cliche, but there is a lot of truth to it too, right?
But you know, one thing I heard in this that troubled me a little was kind of the assumption that if you're living in poverty, you must have some sort of relationship problem. You must not be smart. You know, working in social services, we used to say a lot of times to legislators that just because someone's poor doesn't mean they're stupid. Sometimes people are very capable, but they're just in the difficult way. So I know he was making a point to get his concept across, but there was, and maybe I over focused on that, but the kind of the presumption that, well, the problem is you're flawed, you're broken somehow. I'm sure that is true in some cases, but
yeah, no, I agree with you. You're right, Brian. I'm glad you brought it up because I think you're right. He was using extremes to make a point. But that said, it is important for us to note exactly what you said. Did you want to say something too? I'm sorry. I saw you at the mic, so.
I was gonna agree because, I mean, yeah, the same thing. I think, it's illustration, whatever, but I was like, okay, so they've made the toothpick house. It falls down when they go home. And now the people wherever they were are like, okay, we should build bricks. Who's gonna pay for those bricks? I mean, that's part of a lot of like people who do short-term missions, they're coming with money too. And that's one of the big components. So I think I kind of get the point of illustration, but also I was like, what money? Okay.
You're right. It does. There is, you're approaching the gray area of this whole conversation, right? Which is important. Eventually we're going to get, that's what discerning good ministry and good mission is about, is playing in that gray area and figuring out what's helpful and what's not. Elaine, yeah.
Well, sometimes too,
You're good. It just takes a second.
sometimes too, we forget to ask them what they need. Assess the situation. I guess that would be the correct thing.
Yep, that's definitely part of it. I mean, so I have this paragraph I'm supposed to read as part of this, but ultimately, I mean, if you watch the news any day of the week, we can watch and see natural disasters happening around the world. Commercial comes on, change of tone, something funny about a dog will pop up on the news and everybody's excited about it. And then after the next commercial break, there'll be something about how a homeless shelter is being, is needed or is being so well used and so important in the community. It's just, we have to play with that gray area and figure out exactly what each person, what each community needs and can benefit from. But before we get there, we'll get there is really the important part of this. Okay, so we talked at one point about paternalism, and paternalism being that which we do for others that they can do for themselves. This is really this is very much part of the black and white, right? We can tell when we're doing something that someone else can do. Rachel, who's the one that spoke at the beginning of the video, she's the one in the car driving, or in the passenger side rather. She said, when you give free things, they will not own that money. They will misuse that money. I have a thought on this too, as when you give free things, it's likely that you are lowering their dignity and increasing the poverty level. More than once, I had this image of the stimulus checks coming in during the pandemic. We could talk about that, I'm sure, as well, but that had different intent. The purpose was to spend. But still, it was interesting to think about. So there's different ways that paternalism will manifest itself. Resource paternalism, that's when you give something to people that they don't need. Spiritual paternalism, it's when you take spiritual leadership away from a community, something that they are very capable of doing, but because they're not doing it right, we're going to help them do it correctly, right? That's historically way more than we do now, but that is very true for a very long time. Knowledge paternalism, assuming that we know the best ideas. So we know how to make bricks, so we'll help them with the bricks. But we may not know how to make the best bricks in their community. We may not know the subtleties of what's happening with clay, etc., for example. Labor paternalism, doing work for the materially poor that they can do for themselves. This is something that we could be criminally charged for, I'm sure, at some point. And then managerial paternalism, taking ownership of the change away from them. And that one's more subtle, but equally, if not more important than the others even.
Could that be maybe turned? I was wondering if not necessarily taking it away from them, but maybe showing a different way of working or a way of efficient way of doing it, and saying, what do you think? Here's another idea, just to throw it out there and offer it.
Excellent. See, I agree with you. I like that idea. I would try that idea at many communities and in many circles. However, there is in many third world countries, there's the white person syndrome, where the white person speaks and everything is done. Conversation finishes. That's how it is. The white person said it. They're the one paying for it. We're going to do it the way they want. And so, whether or not it's spoken, it's implied. It's really unfortunate, but you're right. Like, it's that communism would work if only people weren't involved, right? Like, it's a great idea in theory, but theory never will manifest itself. Yeah, you're very right. Ultimately, ideally, that would work. But yeah, culture comes into play really hard in this. Complicates everything. Respect, that's a part of it too. Yeah, and can you imagine? Yeah, cross-cultural, cross-lingual, in cross-cultural, just gets messy really fast. But that's not an excuse, but it's a reality we live with. So you're right.
We were involved with a PDA project in Louisiana.
Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Minister talk.
There were well, actually, Kathy Montgomery and crew that got us down to Lafayette, Louisiana. It's a project that's been going on. But the week we were there, our job was basically to repair, rehang the outside door that had been, the whole house had been shifted in the flood, and redo the floors. One of the things we did was sit down with the homeowner all the way through the project and say, how do you want to do this? How do you want this to be? How do you want your house to be? And we're the grunts. We may have the skills to do it, but we need your direction. So it's your place. Trying as much as we could to make sure that she told us what she wanted, so that we weren't going to convince them, well, we're going to fix you. We're going to fix you. Yeah.
We're going to fix you and your house too.
Your little dog.
Yeah. A mission. Oh yeah, Brian, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I see a fundamental difference between the first item, the resource paternalism, and the other four. Those last four make perfect sense to me, and the first one, I get it. But I note in the definition of the first, there's a value statement that we're making some assessment of what someone truly needs. And to me, that brings that, or puts that issue in kind of a fundamentally different frame than the other four. I think the other four are very powerful observations in terms of the issue we're talking about. But the first one kind of, I won't say it troubles me, but I think that's a difficult issue there, because there's a lot of power in me discerning what I think you truly need and what you truly don't. And
you're absolutely right. I mean, that's getting at the heart of this whole conversation, right? But yes, Elaine, go for it.
That's what I was thinking, daughter of a civil engineer, when you said if the house is off base, or, you know, I mean, you really need somebody that knows those kinds of issues to come in and at least tell you how to do it. You know?
Right, but if you don't know that you need that, and someone comes in and says, wow, your whole house is shifted, and you don't know what that means, right? I mean, it's still then imposing upon someone. And so it really comes back to that toothpick example. If it's going to cost all that much more money for them to do it the way they need to do it so that they learn a better way of doing it, hoping that that better way of doing it comes somewhere, maybe it comes from us, hopefully it comes from their own learning, maybe that's okay. It's going to feel, it doesn't feel normal, it doesn't feel logical a lot of the time. It really is. When I was doing mission trips with the Christian Reformed Church, I was doing a trip with a whole, have I told this story with the farmers going down to the Dominican Republic, building a building? A bunch of people from my hometown said, we're going to go build a school down in the Dominican Republic. And we said, okay, fine. John, you can go. You can accommodate all these folks as they go down to the Dominican Republic. And so I helped them go down there. And for 10 days, 50 farmers went down there, and they are all workhorses and put me to shame. Built, you know, from the ground up, they did the foundation, they did the walls, they put in tile floors, they were about to finish windows when we were leaving. 10 days work, but they didn't go to the beach. They canceled their free day off. They didn't want to go touristy things. They wanted to stay and build this place because that's what they do. The community didn't use the building for months. They didn't go back to it. They didn't try to finish it. When they did go back to it, I found out that they had torn up all the tile because it wasn't done right. And by right, meaning these are all farmers that live in, you know, northern Ontario. The ground is different than it is in the Dominican Republic, especially for a place that is near a beach. Sand sits differently. They didn't think about that. So the building had to be fixed from what all these farmers did. These Dutch farmers from Canada. They were all appalled when they found this out. But when my people come down to say, we're going to go do this, and someone who's a tiler in Ontario says, we're going to lay tile, this is how we're doing it. They couldn't be told no, and the people couldn't tell them no. And so there's a lot more at stake here that needs to be discussed, right? There's conversation needs to be had, relationship needs to be built, trust needs to be built so that nuance and the subtleties of what's going on in a situation can be discussed and interpreted together. So in the video, he used this image, or an image similar to this, to describe the different phases of assistance that we're giving and the ways that we're helping people. So any person can be right here. Any person can get to a point of crisis of some kind, any kind. Say it's me, and I'm in Colombia. We get hit with a tornado, and now I've had a crisis. I'm going to need relief work. That's when you're not going to come to me and say, John, what do you need right now? Because I don't have a home, I don't have a car, I don't have anything. The relief work I need food, water, and shelter. That is relief work. Rehabilitation is any of the work that's done to get someone back to where they were. So that would be, it may be giving me things so that, you know, I get food. That's great. I don't have a job right now. Perhaps the church gets knocked out too. So I don't have work, so I don't have income. So helping me find a new source of income, helping me find a place to get food, helping me get food. Sometimes that'll be giving me food. Sometimes that's helping me find it. Giving me the pots and pans I need so that I can cook my own food. Things like that. It's getting me back to the place of where I was. Development work is anything that gets me beyond where I was before. So if you think of third world missions projects, relief work is where anything is after a crisis. Rehab is anything getting them back to where they were. And almost always international mission work involves getting people past where they were, right? So the development work ends up being most of what churches try to do when they do development work. And when they are going in to do relief work almost always includes getting them past development. Yeah. So, yeah, we can do that way. So if you think of, we've used loaves and fishes, but if there are other outreach programs, other activities that you've been a part of with this church or not, if you had to generalize the work that we do as a church with missions, where is most of our mission work sitting in that chart? Like loaves and fishes would it be relief? Would it be rehab? Would it be development?
It's just fulfilling a needed thing at one time, food.
Food at one time. So I guess it depends on each person probably that's coming to the program. So loaves and fishes, we see a lot of mental health care issues. So then it really is mostly, the loaves and fishes would mostly be in both of those cases. The first two steps, right? It would be a relief work, it would be rehab, hopefully. Most of the time.
Same people for 10 years.
Right. How rehab is it if they're there for 10 years?
Yeah.
You get to know them.
Well,
Means they're on that poverty line.
Right. So their blue line is just really barely above something.
And they can't seem to make it above that.
Mm-hmm.
Their life is whatever it is.
Yeah. The loaves and fishes is hard, but also a very good example of time. So there are problems when it comes to approaching it. And I'm not picking on the program, I promise. It was just the one that came to mind.
Yeah.
Nancy, you were going to say something.
Well, I know that a lot of the mission teams funds go to organizations in town that probably do help with more rehabilitation and development.
Excellent. Yes. So for Brian's sake, that was well, a lot of the mission money, the mission ministry team gives money to many organizations in town and around the country and around the world. Presbyterians do this all the time. As a general statement, it's probably a lot of it goes to development. You said rehab and development, or?
Well, I was thinking that probably some of those organizations take the money to development.
Right. Yeah. I mean, anything with Presbyterian disaster assistance, PDA. The example that I have in my mind right now is Haiti. Remember when Haiti got hit with an earthquake in like 2011, I think? And everybody gave to it. It was over maybe it was over the holidays or something, but it was like everybody was giving to Haiti. Now, Haiti is not a big country. And Presbyterians said, because the way we do our finances and accounting in Louisville, this was a big issue while I was there. They had so much money, they don't know what to do with it. They're still using money from 2011 to do the work that they're doing in Haiti, which, because it was all specifically given to Louisville, to the PSUSA for Haiti. This is why we don't give to Haiti, we give to PDA, or you give to an agency. I could go on, I could preach for hours on that one, but with examples.
Designated funds have to go with it.
Exactly. We don't like designating funds. But you're right, Nancy. So to get back to Nancy's point, where we give our money, and I don't know if I have it in here. I just got a report from Fran about half an hour ago. But where we give our money ends up being a lot of development work, a lot of rehab. And really ultimately PDA is the one that gets our relief work. There's like when there was the tornado in Kentucky, we offered to give money to PDA or to 1 great hour sharing for relief work. But then it would go into rehab and development a lot of the time. Good. I think it's like, so is this concept making sense to people? Okay.
Right now, Louisville's collecting money for rent.
Correct. Right. Except that I'd be interested to see what their promo material says, because the people that were really on that train were quit. So they were like, no more directed giving, no more specific giving. They have quit. So they may be doing generalized or from generalized back into specific giving again, which would not be good. If you give to PTA, give to PTA.
PDA put out a bulletin insert for Ukraine, which the Covenant Church in Marshall discussed at its session and designated to Grand immediately, and are looking for offerings from the congregation in addition.
I would encourage, I think I'm heading out to Marshall actually on Thursday, maybe not tomorrow. Their PNC, I'm hanging out with the PNC.
You are?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the PNC for my two churches.
I just remember as you're talking, I was like, this connection is big. I might encourage them to give to PDA and earmark it like, relief work, like Ukraine. Just generalize it a nudge.
They don't have that, but I'm more than willing to send a note to the clerk of session tonight that we might want to discuss that quickly at session, have a session meeting Sunday after church.
I would appreciate. I mean, there is a lot of people in Ukraine. They're not going to have money forever, but
and we just designate it to PDA and let them decide where to send it.
1 great hour sharing specifically would do that fantastically. 1 great hour sharing loves to receive money so that they can distribute it.
They can distribute it where it's needed.
Well, because that's my goal. That's my old job.
I'm aware of that. I knew of you before.
my reputation exactly, it precedes me, and the mission budget doesn't actually break it out too much more.
Yeah,
we're good at food. There shall be a covered dish for 2 or 3 are gathered. So, but food is a good example. Where does food fall on this chart all the time? And I think we need to ask that question when we're giving. How helpful is it? It's rare that giving food is going to be hurting someone, right? So it's not the best example for this, but it does remind us that we need to ask that question. What is the purpose of our giving? What is the purpose of our gift and of the work that we're doing, of the ministry that we're supporting? And is it achieving that purpose? So every situation is different, I think. And you know what? Every person receiving through that mission and ministry is probably slightly different.
If you stop at just food,
right,
you're not going anywhere. But if you take Maslow's pyramid, you've got to eat first.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is going to come back to haunt you again, Eileen. You're right. We need to have food.
Yeah, in order to then go beyond.
To go beyond that.
But they rely on that food every night.
Right. And can they get much further in Maslow's hierarchy if they're given the food every time? If we want to mix all our metaphors here, or metaphors, all our examples. Okay. So this week's lesson is primarily to help us come away with this understanding that we need to ask these questions. We need to be able to look at the ministries if this program is meant, this activity, this class is designed to help us ask the right questions so that we can do the right ministries to have the most impact as a church. we need to be thinking these questions, or we need to be thinking about these questions. Where are our dollars going, and are they doing what we're sending them to do? This is something that we're going to be looking at, especially as we look at budget. And keep looking at you, Elaine. I apologize, because you helped manage that budget for a while. And we give a lot of money away. And we need to ask the question, and we need to ask the question, what is the intent of that money going? And is it doing what we feel like what it's supposed to do? Is it going to relief? Is it going to development? Is it going to rehab? How can we inspire that to do better? And that goes for all of our work too in our community. We have a lot of homeless people in the neighborhood. What's the best way to support them? And part of that is discerning where they are on that full scale. Are they recovering from a crisis that happened last week? For some people, every week is a crisis. God bless Charlie. Charlie is one of those people that I know pretty well outside. He has a small crisis often. But I would argue he's on the rehab stage. But I only know that because I have a relationship with him. Mission and ministry is never as easy as it's rarely cut and dry, because it takes a lot of work. Okay.
Well, you had asked about,
We'll get you a mic. There we go.
you had asked about, is the money that we're giving away doing what it needs to do? And I think that then we would almost have to follow the money, you know, and who has the time to do that? And how would we even go about doing that?
It's a good question. Elaine has a thought.
It's better if you're in a small town, because the 3 years I taught at a real small town in Missouri, they knew everybody in town, so they knew who the poor were. Plus, they knew why. They knew all about them. Yeah, everything they needed to know. But they could also help them better, because they said, "Now, don't give them this, but you can give them that." You know, so when you're dealing with this large amount of people that we have to deal with here in Columbia, it's a little bit different, because you can't get down to the bottom line as to what kind of help they really should have.
True. And it comes back again to what Brian said earlier. We can't always know what people need, and who are we to assess what someone's need is? It's not easy. It takes relationship. It takes time. It takes effort. And it takes more than good intention though too, right? Intention is good, and good intentions are better, but it takes more than just good intentions. This isn't going to be cut and dry. I know, that's not the answer that anybody wants to hear. So I'll read this passage from the book that we have real quick. So by this point, you realized poverty alleviation is not something that is simple. It is far more complex than we can deal with it in one sitting. And frankly, it's so complex that it needs to be addressed and approached and studied and considered every time. Residents of low-income communities in the United States, tsunami victims in Indonesia, people around the world are experiencing poverty in very unique and different ways. We need to respond differently and appropriately. If we do not recognize these nuances, we can really end up doing harm in some situations. The blessing in this is that it is not ours entirely to be responsible for. All we can do is offer the help, do what we can, be responsible with what we've got and what we have, and do our best. It's God's work, it's not ours. We have the joy of serving God's kingdom, and we can take confidence in the fact that he does not require perfection from us. God does not require perfection from us. Rather, God asks us to be faithful servants and faithful stewards. The success or failure of God's entire plan, cosmic plan, is not contingent on whether or not we give food to the right person at the right moment. We can't let this whole conversation, we need to have the conversation, but we can't let it be what stops us from offering help. Intentions need to be good, but good intentions are not enough. We need to be wise in how we try to alleviate poverty, but if we stop ministering to the material poor out of fear of doing it wrong, we're just letting our own God complexes get in the way. We are acting as though our efforts are the bottom line rather than God's. So it's a lot of, we need to take control, but also we need to let it go. Next week, we'll be looking at this again, except we'll be focusing on the steps that we can use to move forward in helping without hurting the materially poor, and trusting God will use us as agents, but also transform us as God's children in doing so. Yeah? Yeah, Lane.
And there's somebody sitting right outside the doors too.
Oh, right, as we sit, yeah. Well, I have to go have a conversation with Corbett too. Oh, good. Okay, so this is not supposed to be quick. We'll use this as our closing prayer. It is 7 o'clock, so we'll use this as our closing prayer, and then we'll go our separate ways. Let us pray together. Almighty God, we know that our acts of service and ministry aren't as effective as they could be. We fail to understand the symptoms. We are too self-centered to see the problem, or we're simply caught up in good intentions without good directions. Forgive us and guide us, O God. Grant us humility to ask hard questions, perseverance to listen patiently, hope that you would work in us and in spite of us, and joy in our every act of service. Amen. There's that. Thank you all. Next week we'll do it again, except more hope next week. And I apologize, I did not update this. So this week's classes, we're looking at chapters 4 and 7. That was just today's class. Next week's class, if you are reading the book or if you have the book and like to reference it, next week we're looking at 5 and 6 in the big book, the original book.
Funny mission story. This was years ago.
Thank you all. If you want to stay, you can. If you want to leave, you can. I'm just saying.
But the story is, and it's a personality went on doing this.
Yeah, please. Brian's patiently waiting around to listen. So.
All right. Well, I'll finish.
Brenda. Hi, Brenda.
You'll catch the significance later. The went down to Central America just on a vacation trip, and ended up there was this little country church, and he showed up one Sunday morning, went into worship, and he was the only Anglo in the place. It's all natives, and they weren't sure who this guy was, but he sat with them and discovered that he would sing along with the hymns, and he would praise with them, and afterwards they sat down and wanted to know if he was just in there slumming or if he was really a believer. And they questioned him for about a half an hour about his beliefs. And he defended his beliefs, and they became convinced that he was faithful. He said, what can I do to help you? And they said, well, really, we need to update our facilities. We've got a bus to bring people in from the outlying villages, but we need some more help in our facilities. We can do the work, but we can't afford the materials. So he said, okay. So he went back home, he raised some money, and he sent it back to them. Went back to visit about 3 years later, and he arrived and he saw the building was pretty much the same as it had been, but there was an outbuilding, and he wanted to know, well, what was it you need? We're waiting for you to come back to have the dedication. What we really needed were outhouses. So they whipped off the sign, and it says Bud Collier Memorial Privy. He was a big TV personality back in the 50s, 60s.
Well, that's humbling, if nothing else, to have some toilets named after you.
Well, he was, well, he just said they were flush with success. Well, he was a Presbyterian elder from the church in New York, and he was doing this at a synod gathering, and he said it was probably the highlight of my year was that because it said they accepted me.
Right.
You know, they didn't have to sugarcoat what I was doing. It was like, I'm one of them now.
Yeah. Aw, that's hilarious. Terrifying, but hilarious.